Welcome, folks, to episode 120 of the Super Parent Syndrome, and I am your host, Dr. Nick Fanning. Sit back, relax, let's get started. Today's topic is, why the heck do I keep stopping here?
Parenting in the 21st century is ever evolving, and while you balance work, kids, and your sanity, it's easy to feel discouraged. Welcome to the Super Parent Syndrome with your host, Dr. Nick Fanning.
So, we started season 3. And here's the thing. I've been doing seasons because every once in a while I'm going to have to take a break here and there. And I can tell you this. Some people are like, hey, are you going to keep doing episodes? What's going on? Why did you stop? And I can tell you this, is that when you have a podcast like this, which is an absolute labor of love, okay? I have lots of other content. Most of it's video. It's usually organized in a third-party website where it's like a series, like basically taking a class. And I use this podcast more for the fact of that, hey, I have a lot of clients that they jive with the information, but they want to hear more. They want to just hear like, hey, what's a daily snippet? And this is like one of those ways that I can just do a free, basically a free clip notes version of some of the more intense stuff that we talk about. And it's a lot of fun, but at the same time, I got other projects to do. I'm a full-time doctor, I'm a full-time dad, I'm a full-time spouse. And, honestly, sometimes you just don't have time to be a full-time podcaster as well. So I apologize on this, but I want to say this, is that there's a lesson in here, and I want to push it upon you folks, is that when you prioritize your life and you have a clear idea of what your goals and long-term goals are, it is far easier to be able to say no to certain projects that may not be serving you, okay? And here's the thing. As a nation or as a species, we have a hard time letting go of projects that we put time and energy into long after the fact that these things should be shut down sometimes. Okay. And so this is like case in point. We might be starting to build this project and it's just going terribly. We might be building a cabinet or something like that and the wood is warped and things aren't jiving well. At some point, you just kind of have to cut bait, which means you have to stop the project and either just start over or completely redo it. Well, here's the thing. This podcast, I don't want to stop doing it. I don't want to cut it down, but there are going to be times where I'm going to be taking breaks, okay? And case in point is that we had child number 5, and as you can tell, as you know, our house is probably pretty crazy at this time, okay? So our little darling little girl had a problem with sleeping. And I can tell you this, it's odd that she had trouble sleeping because one of my niche markets as a chiropractor is helping babies sleep. In fact, I can only think of like maybe 3 kids who have not been able to get to sleep through the night. And 2 of those were my kids. So here's the weird thing. We were having problems with getting her to actually sleep through the night and take decent naps. And because of the extra time that would take just holding this little girl and getting her to sleep that way in her arms, any way, shape, or form we could do it, that I was just running short on time. Now, that's an excuse that everybody's going to have. Okay, but I can tell you this, is I wanted to spend the time that I did have available being a better dad to my kids, because I can tell you this, I was spending I'd get home from work at 5:30, I would have to grab the baby and get her to fall asleep, and unfortunately, I'd be there in a dark room with my baby as my family would be doing their own thing, and I felt like I was lacking as a dad. I felt like I was lacking as a spouse, and I can definitely tell you that I was lacking as a business owner because I wouldn't be able to have time to, per se, rest and recover and restore and be able to come back renewed because we were constantly having to pour into this child and I'd have to sleep in a chair or things like that. Now, I'm not trying to complain, but basically this is my point, is that there are times where you just have to be honest with yourself and cut back. It might be not doing the PTO. It may not be like dropping out of Lions Club for a while, or it might be the fact of like, hey, instead of signing up for an extra project at work, I need to spend more time at home. And what I would suggest to you is that there's a certain order that you want to prioritize things. First of all is yourself, your health, and your spirituality. Like if you don't have those things, it's hard to add anything else. And yes, you got to eat. You got to be able to work and put food on the plate so they can actually eat some of these things. But you can't do that if you're in terrible health. So you got to focus on sleep. You got to focus on nutrition. You got to focus on exercise. You got to focus on filling your cup. And that means spiritually as well, because again, that might be meditation, or it could be prayer for you. It could be quiet time for you or introvert time for you. And it could be honestly reading and making sure that you're connecting with something. Okay. So here's the thing. If you have those two things, then you can actually start kind of expanding out, which then I put priorities as family, and then I put priorities as work. So with family, it's really easy to determine priorities when one gets sick. You drop everything to take care of them. So you realize that, hey, this is important. And yes, again, like I said, you have to be able to produce so you can pay your bills. But at the same time, you have the base level. Okay. So what I mean there is that I'm not going to be trying to push to expand my business or see more clients or do this huge marketing campaign or write a book or take my podcast to a whole new level if things aren't taken care of at home. And I can't take care of things at home if I'm not getting the rest I need and I'm not eating correctly. Okay, so it just piles backwards and it piles forward. Now I can tell you this is that I can maintain my business as I'm working out other things. My relationships, I can maintain my relationships with my kids and my family while I'm trying to work on my health and work on my spirituality. But I'm not going to be able to be in a place of growth and expansion if I have nothing to grow and expand upon. And that's what I mean. And folks, I can tell you, I took a very long way in the conversation around to get to this point, but that's what I mean, is if you can maintain or you can be in a growth and expansion. And in worst place, you can also be declining, which means that you're not even doing the bare minimum, and so you're letting things suffer. And I'm never suggesting that part. I'm never suggesting the fact that you should be not connecting with your kids or your spouse because you got to work out or you got to do nutrition. No, there's a way to do both, okay? But I can tell you this, is that you may not be training for a half marathon. You may not be training for a Spartan race. You might just be doing the bare minimum. You may not be trying to lose 40 pounds, but you're definitely not going to be looking at trying to gain weight or lose in extreme fashion. You might just be maintaining. So as you're working in your life, making sure that you have those things prioritized is key. So how do we actually put this into step? It's hard to do this over a podcast. I mean, it's a lot easier when we're working one-on-one with each person because everybody has their own priorities. Everybody has their own values and core values. And to do a blanket statement online or on the podcast is just absurd to even think that we could do that. But here's a couple basic tips that you can get started. One, if you lost everything else and everything else is going wrong, what is the one thing that you'd want to be going right? I've been at this point in my life, and I can tell you that I wanted this. I wanted my kids to be healthy, meaning I didn't want my kids in the hospital. I didn't want them to be sick with cancer. I didn't want them to be suffering or anything else. That was my bare minimum. Okay, so that shows a pretty big priority of like, okay, my kids are that important to me. And then you start slowly working out for that. Okay, and what I would suggest is that perhaps maybe you could schedule into a couple things. Is one, health, then spirituality, then family, then business. What would it look like? Doing the bare minimum, so maintaining, and then what would it look like for growth? Meaning, to maintain my health, I know that I'd have to work out at least once every 3 days. Okay, I don't think anybody should go more than 3 days without sweating. So that I know that, hey, I got to at least make sure I get a workout 2, sometimes 3 times a week. Okay, 3, what does that nutritionally look like? Okay, I got to make sure I hit my green smoothie. So I'm going to use a greens first shake, or I could use, they have athletic greens. They have different shakes like that. So I'm going to make sure I get my green vegetables in. Yes. And then I make sure I hit a threshold of calories. I'm not going too low, but I'm definitely not going too high. And what are some other things? Hey, no fast food. Okay, no soda. Making sure that I get my water in. Okay, so that could be something. And then, okay, what can I do as far as sleep goes? Now, I can tell you, with this little baby girl, I was honestly sleeping 2-3 hours. So that was my bare minimum. And I was not liking that, but that's what I was trying to do to keep everybody else healthy and happy. For you, it might be 5 hours. It might be 6 hours. But making sure that you have that consistently. Spirituality, what do I have to do? Okay, for me, I got to meditate. And I got to meditate twice a day. Ideally, they're 10 minutes each. Minimum, 5 minutes. Now, I know if I can do 10 minutes each of meditation, I'm actually in a state of growth. I'm actually doing better and better. But that's just me, okay? What as far as relationships, what does that mean? So that means giving notes or hugs or kisses or making sure that you have one-on-one time. You got to figure out what's that right for you. What's growth and expansion and what is bare minimum? And then last but not least, what is it in business, okay? If you have your budget taken care of, you know what these numbers are. If you're working for somebody else, you basically know that, hey, I got to show up and I got to be able to do this standard of work and I will be able to stay employed, but I'm definitely not going to be working towards a getting a promotion. I'm definitely not going to be working towards a raise. But then you can also say like, hey, what would be valuable enough if I brought to the company where I could be in a state where I could ask for a raise or for a promotion? And if I do this work for a period of time, then I know I'd be eligible to be in the position to ask or even look at doing a side project or whatever it might be. Now, if you're an entrepreneur and you have your own business, this is more and more obvious because you're always on the hunt for what can you do better? What can you do next to give better and better service and communication to your clients? So folks, this was a longer episode, but I can tell you it's super important. And it was one of those things that I had to take deeply look at as I was working with my own life. And that's why I cut back with the podcast, because honestly, I was looking at, hey, I'm not looking at expanding this podcast. I just got to basically coast, unfortunately, here because I got so much other things going on. Now, terrible excuse. I've let you guys go, but I can tell you this is that I have a lot of really fun things planned for this next season. And I hope you stick around with it because I'm going to be doing anything from interviews with a sleep therapist to some of my friends. But then also we have a lot of topics that we're just going to basically stop blowing smoke. We're going to be starting to get kind of dirty and kind of into some deep, hard subjects. So I hope you join me on this process this year. So anyway, until next time, folks, thanks so much. This is Dr. Nick Fanning signing off.
Thanks for listening to another episode of The Super Parent Syndrome. Please be sure to visit peptalksforparents.com for more content and our free newsletter. And remember, you are not alone.